3 miles above sea level in the frozen peaks of the Andes, there's a hole in the mountain. Not a cave, not a natural formation, a wound carved by human hands centuries before the Spanish arrived. The locals call it Cerro Rico, the rich mountain, but archaeologists call it something else. Impossible, because what lies beneath shouldn't exist. Not according to everything we know about pre-Columbian mining technology. Not according to the timeline we've accepted for thousands of years. They've been digging for silver here since before the Inca Empire even existed, before Christ walked the earth, going deeper and deeper into darkness that swallows light. Modern mining engineers descended into these tunnels with their equipment, their safety gear, their assumptions about ancient capabilities. They found shafts plunging 500 meters into solid rock. That's deeper than the length of 5 football fields, straight down into the earth. And here's what makes your skin crawl. No one knows how they did it. Let's go back, way back. It's roughly 200 BC. The world stage belongs to different players. Rome is expanding across the Mediterranean. Han Dynasty China is consolidating power. Egypt belongs to the Ptolemies. And high in the Andes, in what we now call Bolivia, people are mining silver from a mountain that will eventually hollow out like a rotten tooth. These aren't the Inca. The Inca Empire won't exist for another 16 centuries. These are the cultures that came before, the Tiwanaku. The Wari, peoples whose names we barely remember, whose stories have been swallowed by time, but their mine remains. Cerro Rico rises from the Altiplano like a perfectly symmetrical cone, almost too perfect. Local legend says the mountain itself is a deity, a sleeping god made of silver. The Spanish believed the legends when they arrived in 1545. One look at that mountain and they knew they'd found the key to infinite wealth. But the Spanish didn't dig Cerro Rico, they just expanded what was already there. The tunnels were waiting for them, hundreds of them, thousands, branching through the mountain like veins through flesh, some wide enough to walk through upright, others so narrow you had to crawl on your belly through darkness, breathing dust that hadn't moved in centuries. And they went down past the water table, down into depths that required advanced pumping systems to keep from drowning, down to places where the air itself becomes your enemy. The Spanish had gunpowder. They had iron tools. They had European mining expertise accumulated over millennia. The pre-Inca cultures had stone hammers, bronze chisels, fire. Somehow, with these primitive tools, they reached depths that should have been impossible. Modern geologists entered these ancient tunnels in the 1990s, not to mine, to understand. They mapped the shaft systems. They analyzed the extraction techniques. They tried to reconstruct the methods used by people who left no written records, no instruction manuals, no engineering diagrams. What they found didn't make sense. The deepest pre-Columbian shafts reach 500 meters down. That's comparable to some medieval European mines. Except those European operations used water wheels, mechanical pumps, elaborate ventilation systems. The pre-Inca miners had none of this. So how did they breathe down there? How did they prevent flooding in tunnels that cut below the water table? How did they light their way without suffocating from smoke in confined spaces 500 meters underground? Dr. Maria Santos, a mining archaeologist from the University of La Paz, spent 3 years studying the ancient sections of Cerro Rico. She examined tool marks on the tunnel walls. She analyzed the rock debris left behind. She studied the angles of the shafts, the support structures, the ventilation channels carved into solid stone. Her conclusion: these miners understood geology in ways that shouldn't have been possible for their time period. They knew exactly where the silver veins ran. They followed ore bodies through solid rock with precision that required knowledge we can't explain. The Spanish chroniclers noted something strange when they first explored the pre-existing tunnels. The rock walls bore marks from a technique called fire setting. You light fires against the rock face, heat it until it's nearly molten. Then you douse it with cold water. The thermal shock fractures the stone. It works, slowly, painfully. The smoke alone would kill you in an enclosed space. But the ancient sections show evidence of fire setting at depths where smoke should have made the technique impossible to use, where carbon monoxide should have killed anyone who tried, which means they solved the ventilation problem. Somehow, the tunnels themselves provide clues. Some of the ancient shafts angled deliberately, not straight down, but in careful spirals, creating natural air currents, allowing smoke to rise while fresh air descends through parallel passages. It's sophisticated. It's planned. It's engineering that required understanding thermodynamics before anyone had invented the word. Here's where it gets darker. The Inca eventually conquered this region. They absorbed the local cultures, their knowledge, their sacred sites, and they kept mining Cerro Rico. They expanded the tunnels. They pulled silver from the mountain to fund their empire. But they didn't just mine for wealth, they mined for the gods. In Inca cosmology, metals weren't just resources. They were the sweat of the sun and the tears of the moon, sacred substances, living things, and Cerro Rico was especially sacred. Spanish priests documented what they found when they first entered the deeper tunnels. Chambers that weren't for mining. Spaces carved into the rock at terrible depths, decorated with offerings, silver figurines, textiles, the mummified remains of children. The Inca practiced capacocha, child sacrifice. They chose perfect children from across the empire, dressed them in fine clothes, gave them coca leaves to chew, chicha to drink, walked them up sacred mountains, and sealed them alive in the earth. Some of these burial chambers exist in Cerro Rico, deep in the tunnels, in the ancient sections that predate even the Inca, which means the cultures before the Inca also saw this mountain as more than a mine. It was a temple, a living god, a place where the boundary between earth and underworld grew thin. The miners who descended into those depths weren't just workers, they were priests, performing a ritual as important as any ceremony conducted in daylight. They went down into darkness with stone tools and fire and faith, and they carved chambers in the deep earth where they left their children to guard the silver veins forever. The Spanish extracted 8 million tons of silver from Cerro Rico between 1545 and 1825. 8 million tons. That silver funded the Spanish Empire. It paid for wars across Europe. It flowed through the hands of merchants in Seville, bankers in Amsterdam, pirates in the Caribbean. It built cathedrals. It minted coins that circulated across the entire planet. And it killed approximately 8 million people in the process. The Spanish forced the local population to work the mines under the meter system, a labor draft that was technically temporary but functionally endless. Men descended into Cerro Rico and many never came back. The tunnels collapsed. The air ran out. Mercury poisoning from the refining process destroyed their bodies from the inside. Silicosis turned their lungs to stone. The mountain consumed them. And here's the thing that haunts modern researchers. The pre-Inca cultures mined Cerro Rico for centuries. Possibly over 1,000 years. They went just as deep as the Spanish. They pulled silver from the same veins, but they did it differently. The Spanish tunnels are chaotic, desperate, cut at angles that made cave-ins inevitable, barely supported, driven by greed and cruelty and the assumption that human life was cheaper than timber. The ancient tunnels show planning, precision, careful reinforcement, gradual descent following the natural structure of the rock. It's almost as if the ancient miners cared. Not just about the silver, but about the mountain itself, about the people who entered it, about the balance between taking what you need and preserving what must remain. Today, Cerro Rico is dying. 45,000 miners still work the mountain. They descend every day into tunnels that are 4 centuries old, 5 centuries old, older. They use dynamite now, power tools. They rip silver from the rock at a pace that would horrify the ancient engineers. And the mountain is collapsing, literally collapsing. The peak has subsided by several meters. Cracks run across the surface like wounds. Entire sections of the old city below have been evacuated because the ground itself is unstable. UNESCO has warned that Cerro Rico might simply fall in on itself within the next few decades. When that happens, thousands of years of human history will collapse into the darkness below. The ancient tunnels, the Inca burial chambers, the evidence of mining technology that we still don't fully understand. Gone. Archaeologists are racing to document what they can. Mapping tunnels that haven't been entered in centuries, recording tool marks on walls deep in the earth, trying to extract knowledge from a mountain that's running out of time. Dr. Santos led an expedition in 2019. They descended to one of the deepest pre-Columbian levels accessible, 500 meters down, where the air pressure makes your ears pop, where the temperature rises from geothermal heat, where modern electric lights barely penetrate the darkness. They found a chamber. Small, carefully carved, with walls smoothed by tools that left distinctive marks. In the center of the chamber sat a stone altar. On the altar, preserved by the dry air and stable temperature, they found textile fragments, the remains of a woven bag. Inside the bag were coca leaves, still green, still fresh enough that you could identify the species, 2,000 years old, and perfectly preserved. Someone left an offering in this chamber before Rome fell, before the Inca existed. Before the Spanish even knew the Americas existed, they descended 500 meters into solid rock with stone tools and fire. They carved a sacred space, they made an offering to the mountain, and they left. We think of ancient peoples as primitive, limited by their tools, constrained by their technology. But Cerro Rico tells a different story. It tells us that people without writing systems created engineering solutions we struggle to replicate. That cultures we barely remember accomplished feats that required knowledge we thought developed centuries later. The pre-Inca miners of Cerro Rico understood geology, thermodynamics, structural engineering, and ventilation systems. They went deeper into the earth than they should have been able to reach. They did it sustainably, for over 1,000 years, and they left behind a mystery that modern science still can't fully explain. Because the real question isn't just, how did they dig so deep? The real question is, what else did they know? What other knowledge existed in the ancient world that we've lost? What other achievements lie buried beneath centuries of assumption and forgetting? Cerro Rico is a wound in the mountain. But it's also a window, a glimpse into capabilities we didn't know ancient peoples possessed. And as the mountain collapses, as the tunnels fill with rubble and the evidence disappears into the dark, we are losing our chance to learn from the miners who descended into the depths with nothing but stone and fire and an understanding of the earth that we've somehow forgotten. The Silver Queen is dying, and she's taking her secrets with her.